Connor Hellebuyck is officially the first Hart Trophy winner in Winnipeg Jets history. Baby, it is time to celebrate.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, it is extra fun. Connor Hellebuyck is officially your Hart Trophy winner. On top of all the other awards you expected him to win, he has also won the franchise's first ever MVP award. How friggin' cool is that? Obviously, the playoffs may not have gone super well for the team in some ways, but you know what? It does not erase what was a tremendous season and some incredible individual highlights that we had from our star players. Connor Hellebuyck getting recognized for the greatest award of them all, the one that's honestly extremely, extremely hard for a goalie to win. It is the first goalie since 2014-15's Carey Price to win the Hart. So what a run for him it's been. And amidst all of this, of course, lots of trade rumors to chat about tonight. A lot of teams seem to be very active, and maybe not all of them are selling, which is going to be a very intriguing little road for the Winnipeg Jets. But let's start off with Hellebuyck, right? So this year was truly one for the record books. Hellebuyck has honestly been really one of this league's best goalies for many, many years, and we all knew this, right? We have talked about him honestly being, in my mind, a Hart competitor for a lot longer than the season. Helly is one of those guys who's almost metronomic in his performance. You know what you're getting with him almost every game. And during the regular season, there's really no one better than him in the league. I've always sung his praises. There was maybe one or two early seasons where you weren't really sure if he was ever going to become consistently that guy. He had some real work to do. And, there were moments where you thought maybe he should have some competition in goal. But since then, he has completely become the face of this franchise. Everything the Jets do really is built around Connor Hellebuyck. And this year, he set some personal career milestones. He had a crazy amount of wins this season, 47, which is a career high. He also had the lowest goals against average of his career and the best save percentage by a single percentage point. And he even led in shutouts, right? So what a crazy year for him. And what's kind of interesting is you actually look at the number of shots against, and this was one of the seasons where there were fewer shots on goal that he faced compared to maybe some of the other years where he was getting upwards of almost 2,000, if not over 2,000 shots against. So Winnipeg definitely did a little bit to try and smarten up defensively, and I think that was awesome. But make no mistake, Connor Hellebuyck put together one of the craziest goaltending seasons you'll ever see. I think he had almost every single statistical category a goalie could lead nailed down, barring one of the ones late in the season, if I recall correctly, but doesn't matter. Who cares? So not only has he won the Vezina as well, but he also got, of course, his second consecutive Jennings trophy for, the team conceding the least amount of goals in the league. And it's also, I think, the first time that we've had a goalie win the Jennings consecutively without sharing it with another goalie on the same team. And so Hellebuyck, he is a one-man army. Everything the Jets do has ever been really built around his whole success. And it's interesting because, there are very few teams out there who would ever come close to being built the way Winnipeg is. And you can debate as to how successful that is in the postseason, but I'll tell you one thing. In the regular season, no one is topping this Jets team when it comes to goaltending, defensive stingincy, or defensive stinginess, all that stuff, right? Winnipeg has really, been a tough team to crack. They were the President's Trophy winners this year. Hellebuyck was really chief at the forefront of the success. What a year it's been for him. What an awesome award for him to win. And honestly, I think all of us just couldn't be prouder. In terms of what this really means for the franchise now, you have your guy who's going to be a Hall of Famer. There's zero question. Obviously people will say that he needs the cup, but he doesn't. He already has all the qualifications to reach a Hall of Fame nomination. In my mind, it's locked up, right? You've got 3 Vezinas, you've got 2 Jennings, you've got a Hart. He's in. There's just zero question about it. Really, all that's left for Helly, though, just to secure his own Jets legacy uh, at a level that's clear and above so many others already, it's just to add the cup ring. That's all he's missing. That's the one thing that I think he wants personally. It's the one thing that this franchise really needs. And, obviously this year kind of felt like it was supposed to be the season if the Jets were going to do it. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe things are going to have to change now. And we'll see if the Jets can come back next season stronger. I think that there were some really tough lessons for this team to learn in the postseason, like there's been the last several years. But they did learn in some ways from the previous year. And so I'm hopeful that, going forward, year by year, they start to turn things around. But with Hellebuyck, you do wonder how many more crazy seasons does he have left in him? Last year was one of his best seasons of his career ever. Maybe you look at the save percentage and you don't think so, but promise me, trust me, if you look at his goals saved above replacement, you look at the actual performance relative to the rest of the league, he was basically pacing everyone and pacing the league at the forefront as the world's best goalie. This year, he somehow bettered that. I don't know how that's possible. He got better. At age 32, he has somehow hit his best peak form ever. And so you just wonder, how many more seasons can he keep doing it? Is he going to decline at any point in the near future, or is Helly here to stay for the foreseeable future, and your window is consequently just a little bit longer than you might think? So the Jets really have to make the most of this. Helly himself will also admit that he probably has to be better in the postseason. He did get better against the Stars. I think that was a very good series on the whole from him, even though maybe the scorelines didn't always show it, but I thought he really showed up in most of those games, even had a couple of shutouts. So that's pretty darn cool. Now it's just, down to the team around him starting to improve and really pushing that extra distance. I do think that this team can win a cup with him. I think it's going to be very hard, and there's a lot of movement around the league that might make it difficult for this upcoming season to be the year that the Jets make the run. But, it's all part of the growing process and the cycle. So in the meantime, the only thing that you should really be thinking about is how sick and awesome Hellebuyck is, and the fact that he has won a whole host of trophies already. He is already this team, not only from previous Jets iterations, but this franchise, the best goalie this city has ever seen. He's one of the best goalies in NHL history. He's entering the conversation of guys like Hasek, Wah, all these legends of the game. And if he finally adds that one elusive ring that he's desperately looking for, there's just nobody really out there who can truly touch him. He has been truly one of the most consistent, most stable, most incredible goalies. And without him, I just don't even know what this team would look like. I remember, last year or so when there were conversations about him walking in free agency, we did talk a little bit about it maybe needing to happen in some ways, but the fan in me was just dying. Like I could not mentally picture him in another jersey, and I'm so glad that he's still here. He is our rock and our foundation, and I hope that he does so for the remainder of his career. So congrats to Connor Hellebuyck, to the Hellebuyck family. It is an awesome moment. Congrats to the city of Winnipeg. This is hopefully the first of many incredible seasons to remember with Hellebuyck, on top of a bunch of other crazy seasons he's already had, right? I say first, and we already know he's already had best goalie awards previously. Now it's time to finally turn all of that into a super awesome playoff run. But of course, I did mention that next season might not be the year for the run. There's a lot going on. I want to talk about some of the intriguing trade rumors and stuff and offer sheet rumors, because it seems like we are going to see some stuff this coming off season that we don't normally see from teams, especially with the cap going up. So lots of movement. Let's chat about that in a brief moment. Wonderful Pistachios is the snack that's both delicious and nutritious. It's a great source of protein, and it comes packed with flavor. Each 1-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. And they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. Now, as a Marylander, I actually like the shell variety. We are used to cracking open crabs down here, so it's really not any extra work, but maybe you're on the go. You just need something to pop open, throw it in your mouth, and get on with your day, right? You want to beat that 3 p.m. slump. You want to have something before you drop your kids off at school, or maybe you need a protein punch before you hit the gym. Wonderful Pistachios is here to help. It's a complete protein providing all 9 essential amino acids. It comes in a no-shell variety, and there are some great flavors and seasonings to give a try. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, you're seeking so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are chatting a little bit about swirling trade rumors. Obviously, you can tell we're going to talk a little bit about who's selling and what the latest updates around the league are. That Kreider trade that we were talking about earlier did finally go through. Kreider and a fourth-round pick went to Anaheim, and the other way was Carey Terrence and a third-round pick. So interesting. I've heard some talk about the Kreider trade not really being so much about Kreider the player, so much as it is Kreider the person. Trevor Zegras has been a guy that we've talked about maybe the Jets taking a punt on, but every time I've talked about him, I've usually gotten some pushback from folks, and really it's kind of come down to his attitude. This kind of feels like a move to maybe try and fix that. So that's interesting. The Ducks are trying to be in on a lot of players, apparently. It sounds like they're going after everyone, including Robertson, maybe, Mitch Marner, all that stuff. Anaheim is spending big. So curious to know if that means they might try for maybe an Ehlers edition. That could be a real consideration because obviously the free agent wing market's going to be down to a couple of key players, Ehlers likely being one of the biggest, unless the Jets re-sign him in the next couple weeks, which could, obviously impact that whole landscape. But for now, I think we've kind of assumed that that's not going to get done just yet. If Ehlers does re-sign, I feel like it happens maybe after July 1st. I don't know. We'll just have to keep an eye on that and sort of take it day by day. But one of the other teams that's apparently getting very active, and this team, I talked about yesterday as maybe being a trade partner, it's the Rangers. New York is apparently looking at J.J. Peterka maybe to offer an offer sheet, and that's intriguing. Offer sheets, we don't really see a lot of ones for big-name players. Most offer sheet tactics really should target middle-of-the-pack kinds of guys. You want to have compensation that's not crazy, but you also want to target players who are maybe not really worth trying to match a slightly above-average contract offer for a depth player who maybe on another team could actually see his role grow and become almost underrated for the value. But on their current team, they're just not seeing enough ice time to really be worth it. Maverick Bourque, I think, is one of those key targets. Paterka is not in that class. JJ is very clearly one of Buffalo's best players, and they probably don't want to lose him. It's a little odd and unusual that he's among so many trade rumors. You don't really see players of his caliber, especially at his age, getting moved. But Buffalo might also be a little bit desperate. So if the Rangers really are trying this whole offer sheet route, it does make me wonder if Buffalo tries to jump the shark here and get out ahead of this with a trade. Maybe they do that. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just let the offer sheet happen and then try and match it. I have no idea how the Sabres are going to handle this. They don't like a lot of upfront money. So if you try to do it that way with a front-loaded contract, Buffalo might just walk away and say no. So very intriguing, but the fact that the Rangers are trying to do some of this stuff makes me wonder how much they're actually willing to sell. This does tie into a later segment, and we'll talk about which teams are actually actively shopping players. But if the Rangers are buying, it also makes me wonder if they actually intend to do any big deals with a player like, say, Lafreniere, maybe Miller. Now, Keandre Miller does seem to be on the way out. Apparently, he's expected to be gone by July 1st. So I don't really worry so much about him, but a lot of the other players, maybe they're not really being shopped and being moved. I honestly don't know what the Rangers' plan is at this point. They're kind of in a weird hinterland of being stuck with a lot of money on the books and not that many players who are going to be hot commodities on the trade market. Trocheck is one of the few guys that I could see maybe being shopped, but, I don't know that he really has that much incentive to move. And, Zibanejad, he had a really horrendous past couple of years. He doesn't really want to leave either. So, yeah, you're in a little bit of an odd spot. From what it sounds like, Will Cooley also does want to stay in New York. So Cooley might not actually be on the trade market. He might extend here over the next couple weeks. A lot of intrigue with the Rangers, I guess. I always joke that they're sort of Jets East. In many ways, it kind of does feel apt, but if they do make another deal, I'd be curious to know what the Rangers would want from Winnipeg and who the Jets would be after. I kind of feel like Miller is maybe the most intriguing target outside of Cooley, but again, uh, finding an actual fit there has been a little bit trickier. So keep an eye out on the Rangers. Let's see what they do. Outside of that, it's been a lot of intrigue over offer sheets, and I think that continues to be one of the more underrated storylines. A lot of teams right now are coming up against some interesting cap constraints where, the cap is obviously going up next season, but they have some big RFAs and expiring UFAs to deal with this offseason. So that kind of makes it a little bit tricky, right? Your timing on maybe some of your other contracts expiring isn't ideal. I look at the Stars as being a chief example of this. They have not really been in a great position to try and make big signings, and players like Bork are going to be on the chopping block if they can't clear some salary off. So if Dallas tries to pay their way to get out of contracts like Dumba and Lyubushkin, keep an eye out for that. That could put them in a really long-term disadvantage. They already spent out the wazoo to get Rantanen. It's a little hefty what they're having to do now to try and get out of the cap situation that they've kind of created for themselves. And yes, it is only a 1-year cap problem, but if you're looking at the Stars as needing to try and really compete in the Central, their window's right now. The cap space next year doesn't help. They have to get space now, this offseason. So, yeah, good luck to them is all I can say. They are kind of in a tough spot is all I can say. They are in a very, very tough spot with a lot of players to resign. As far as other trade targets are concerned, right now I think the Jets are probably going to just be patient. I think if we're looking at Winnipeg's strategy, we'll see them maybe go for fringier or middle tier players first. I don't think that the 2C thing is going to be a solution for some time. I think they're going to have to wait for the dust to settle a little bit. The Jets have been one of those teams that are occasionally a little too patient at times, but I think this is one of those off seasons where patience is going to be rewarded. So I don't know if I really expect Winnipeg to swing big until maybe closer to the draft. If they do that, then maybe they try it after the draft and maybe shop more of the 2026 picks if they think that it's going to get them closer to a truly elite name. The 26 picks are just more valuable in general. Everyone keeps talking about that draft as the one, so it might also behoove the Jets to hang on to those assets if they can. But again, if the right deal comes up, I would certainly be amenable to Winnipeg taking a swing. Brock Boeser out there, obviously a free agent target that I think some teams are going to look at. I keep wondering if the Jets try and take a run at him. Obviously you wouldn't have to trade for him. He's a Minnesota boy. Winnipeg has kind of been high on Boeser in the past, and I don't think his price tag would be crazy. If you can get him at like $5 million a season for a couple of years, I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. So keep an eye out on Boeser's name. He hasn't really been talked about recently at all. A lot of the focus has rightly been on Marner and Ehlers as being two of your top targets. But if the Jets are trying to find some cheap finishing talent and you're looking for a guy who does kind of fit some of the hometown build sort of stuff, he's got some, regional connections, and the Jets have actually liked him before, maybe there's a fit there. Again, me personally, I don't love it. And, obviously teams weren't even willing to give up a first for him at the trade deadline this past March. So that probably says a little bit about where his game is now. But again, at the right price range, if you're looking at a reasonably priced free agent, maybe somebody who can help out your wing depth and maybe offer some bit of roster filling for what we're going to lose if Ehlers walks, Boeser could be an okay stand-in. I again, personally, I'm not a huge fan, but it would be not the worst decision. It just can't be more than like $5.5 million. I think you got to really set a hard cap limit on this. Don't spend too much money on him. And if he does want like 6+, just let him go somewhere else. I feel like that's the most reasonable approach to this. And I know percentage-wise, $5 or $6 million isn't really that much when you look at the overall cap. But Winnipeg has some more tricky situations to navigate after this summer. Next episode, I do want to spend some time talking about one of the biggest ones that's kind of on the horizon and that people have increasingly been talking about because it's coming, it's going to happen. The Kyle Connor situation is very delicate and one that I think is going to be one of the big inflection points for this franchise to figure out what they really feel is valuable for this team. But For tonight's show, I also do want to focus a little bit more on some of the actual teams that might be selling. Apparently, if the reports are to be believed, it's a very short list. Right now, it is currently just the Pittsburgh Penguins who are shopping. If the Penguins right now are the only teams that are selling, who might actually be worth picking up from Pittsburgh? Let's chat about that in a brief sec. Greetings, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are chatting a little bit about the only team that's apparently willing to sell right now. That is the Pittsburgh Penguins. There was a report earlier, I think it might have been from The Athletic, or maybe it was from Pierre-luc, talking about the fact that the only team that's actually actively looking to move guys is Pittsburgh. Now, I don't really believe that. But apparently the general vibe is that this summer, a lot of the bad teams are trying to get better quickly. And it makes me wonder if they feel they can try and squeeze in somehow with all of the quality players that are going to be available on the market. Maybe they think they can leverage some of their assets to try and turn the ship around a little bit faster. There have been recent success stories of teams that have had shorter retooling, sort of retooling on the fly periods. Maybe they feel that they can do something similar. I remain suspicious if I am being honest of this being a super sustainable model. I think a lot of teams think they can do a quick retool, but they actually jump the shark and get a little bit too ahead of themselves, right? They go too fast. They mistime their reads on when their core is actually ready to go. I look at a couple of teams out there that have done it recently. Right now, I'm sort of blanking on at least one big example. It might have been LA may have been one of those teams that I was thinking about. And there was one other that sort of stuck out as trying to jump the gun a bit, and they maybe overestimated what their core was capable of. I think the Rangers are probably one of the other big examples for me. So Pittsburgh is apparently one of the few teams that could be actively moving guys. And this team I actually think makes a lot of sense for a trade partner. We just saw the Jets trade McGroarty for Yeager not too long ago. They've had some decent rapport over those trade talks. I'd actually wonder if you go back to Tommy Novak. Novak's got 2 years left, including this upcoming season. He's priced at just $3.5 million. And for a guy who could become Winnipeg's default like 2C and actually do a pretty decent job, Novak, I think, makes a lot of sense. He's extremely value priced. He doesn't have trade protection. I've been a big fan of his for a while now, and he makes a lot of sense for where the Jets roster is. He also provides a little bit of a stopgap in case something goes wrong, maybe with Lowry's rehab, maybe one of your young prospects like Yeager or Lambert doesn't really show enough in the next year or two to be a center for the future. So Novak could actually fill that gap. He's 28. You could probably re-sign him for a couple of seasons after this. I feel like he makes a lot of sense. The other guy that's going to be probably drawing a fair bit of interest, and this one I feel somewhat hesitant towards, it's Rickard Rakell. Now, Rakell has been reborn with the Penguins. He's been phenomenal, and his contract runs for another 3 years at just $5 million. He seems like a very Paul Stastny kind of acquisition. My concern with Rakell is that the version that you get with him in Winnipeg or elsewhere is just not going to be the same one that's had a career resurgence. Do you really believe this version of him is the real guy, or do you think the guy who was sort of fading out in Anaheim is the real version? And I have a lot of real questions about that. Now, the biggest reason I kind of am slightly pausing on it is just because I feel like Rakell's price this offseason is going to be pretty high, especially as more and more teams try to make moves for centers. I just feel like he's going to be more than he's probably worth in terms of assets. And we know famously the Jets don't spend, so if Rakell's building goes to like some crazy price range, yeah, the Jets are going to be out. I think that would be wise. And that's kind of why I'm looking at Karlsson. I think Karlsson or Novak make a lot of sense. I think Wild Bill's one of those players who, fills the 2C role quite well. You're looking at maybe a Novak to do that role too, and he probably wouldn't cost you an arm and a leg. Maybe Karlsson even doesn't cost that much. But both of those guys are really intriguing options. I could see it being a bit of a power play, and it'd be a very value savvy sort of thing, Novak especially. But if the Jets do try to go for Rakell, the only thing I'll say is I hope it works, right? He's a veteran center. He's been really good the past year or two, so I don't want to write him off. I'm not sure how much of it's going to be something that translates to Winnipeg. Now he is doing this on a not very good Pittsburgh team, so there is something to that whole situation. But I don't know if Arniel's system is going to quite match the up-tempo pace that maybe Sullivan had in his waning moments. But again, I don't want to be like negative necessarily, and I think his contract is also relatively cheap, so you wouldn't really be up the creek without a paddle. But because he's got that extra year of term on top of the two, it just feels like he might be a little more expensive than I'd like. So keep an eye out for that. I really don't feel like this is the only team that's going to be selling. I just think a lot of teams are waiting to see what happens at the draft before they make a really hard decision, right? They're all looking at these offer sheet opportunities. I think they're all just waiting to try and time it right. They don't want to become sellers before they might be able to swing a big player acquisition like a Paterka or something of that nature and miss out on a really good chance to do something. But there's going to be other sellers. Like, make no mistake, somebody's going to be making moves, and I think the Jets are going to be in a really good position to take advantage of some of the scraps. I think there are players like maybe Zacha. Maybe you go back to Pavel and see if he might be willing to come to the Jets. He's got some trade protection. I've thought about him in the past. I have some questions about his own relevance for what the Jets are looking for, but maybe a guy like him from the Bruins, if they start selling, could be a real thing. Maybe you try for Casey Middlestat. Middlestat's really struggled the past couple seasons, but maybe it's just the environment, and a move to Winnipeg could resuscitate his career. Maybe you even get some salary retention on top of that to try and make the deal a little bit more palatable, a little less eye-watering, and the Jets get a reasonably aged, well-priced asset out of it. So a lot of considerations for the Jets. I think this offseason could be super fun. I think we're going to see something slightly out of the box from the Jets, maybe out of the ordinary from this team. I think there's too much riding on this upcoming year and beyond. I think there's pressure now from ownership to really make something happen, and so many teams are going to have to move quality players, which, as I've said on other episodes, is where Kevin Cheveldayoff sometimes does his best work. But let me know how you're feeling about all these sellers. Who do you think is going to be up for grabs? Drop your comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Tomorrow's episode, like I said, I want to tackle one of the biggest questions. What do you do with Kyle Connor? And what are the advantages of re-signing or trading? I don't think it's as easy of a conversation as a lot of people are going to paint it as, but we'll chat about that on tomorrow's show. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. As always, have a great night, and go Jets go.